Can marketing make you liable for murder? I'm Scott Ott with Stephen Green and Bill Whittle, and this episode of Right Angles brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. We're also grateful for the support of our friends at the Patriot Post, America's News Digest. Check out the link in the description below for the Patriot Post. Gentlemen, the Supreme Court of the United States has decided not to stand in the way of a lawsuit that will now move forward at the state level of the parents of the victims of the Sandy Hook shooting, suing Remington Arms, the firearm maker, not specifically just because they made guns, but because of the way they marketed those weapons. Now, the Connecticut Supreme Court had already ruled 4-3 in March that the suit could proceed due to the way that the AR-15 style Bushmaster made by Remington was marketed to young people, including through violent video games. Congress in 2005 passed a law that said that firearm companies could not be held liable for the acts of criminals who used their weapons. This is what the lawyer for the parents say, that the Remington Arms Company continued to exploit the fantasy of an all-conquering lone gunman. Forces of opposition bow down. You are single-handedly outnumbered. This is the kind of advertising or marketing copy, and they targeted young people. They targeted loners with this kind of message. Bill Whittle, I think I know where you stand on gun rights and the Second Amendment. And what is curious to me about this is not the question of whether or not guns can be sold, whether or not an individual can buy weapons, but whether a company is specifically targeting a group of people who create a high risk for the public, in the same sense, I guess, that cigarette companies were nailed because they had targeted marketing to young people. Do you think there's any possibility for culpability or liability there on the part of Remington?
Well, whether that happens in this insane world of ours, I don't know. But certainly there's no culpability there in any kind of a rational society, because basically what you're saying is these advertisers went after people who were likely to buy the product, and that was wrong. And this where does this end? Where does this end? If their argument is that this was advertised for people who were likely to buy guns, and therefore it's the gun manufacturer's fault that this guy went out and shot all these people up, then that's just plain nuts. It's saying that human beings are essentially automatons. And this is what the left loves. They love this idea that people are basically just robots who are influenced by the last thing they saw. So if they see a video game that's violent, they'll go out and kill people. Or if they see a commercial that's attractive to people who want to buy AR-15s, they'll go out and kill people. Or if they do anything like that at all, they'll go out and kill people. But what they'll never come to grips with is that the people who do the killing are people who are mentally ill, and they don't particularly going to be affected by this one way or another. And it makes me wonder, if I was Remington Arms, I would ask, why are they not suing the people who make the AK-47s or the handguns? Why aren't they suing the people that make the handguns that kill 8,000 blacks in America's inner cities every single year? And why aren't they going after the liquor makers who are responsible for any number of drunk driving accidents every given year? And on and on and on and on and on and on we go. Anything so long as it's not my responsibility, anything so long as we can find somebody to blame for this. And I'm sympathetic, needless to say, to people who've had their kids murdered, and I understand the need that they have to find some kind of a solution to this problem, but this problem is not caused by advertising. This problem is caused by mental illness. It's caused by fatherless boys. It's caused by any number of complex social issues that are continuing to get worse, but mostly it's caused by 24-hour news coverage of this event that turns this person into a worldwide celebrity. And everybody knows this. The FBI forensic psychologist who's in charge of mass shootings says that if you really want to solve this problem, don't mention the name, don't mention the kill count, don't mention how it ranks compared to other ones. And the first thing that happens on every single one of these is exactly the opposite of that. So it's easier to blame somebody else. It's easier to blame a gun manufacturer than it is to blame a 24-hour news cycle or whatever the case may be. But ultimately, what they're trying to do is they're trying to blame the fact that Cain bashed Abel's skull in on the rock. And that's not how it works.
And ultimately on God who made the rock.
There you go.
Stephen Green, this is a fraught topic, not the least of which is because it deals with some grieving people who will probably never get over the emotional scars that occurred on that day when their children were cut down by gunfire. I wonder if there's a way in which defenders of the Second Amendment and defenders of the kind of justice system that Bill describes can communicate in a way that connects with those kinds of people, or at least with the people who are supportive of their cause.
I think that would be a big mistake to try that. That's like showing up at somebody's funeral with a sales pitch for medicine of whatever it was that whatever disease it was that killed them. We need a little more tact, a little more understanding than that. That said, it seems to me that this lawsuit is predicated on the idea that people are marketing to other people in such a way as to get them incarcerated so that they can never buy those products again. That is, it's a little ridiculous on the face of it. Now it's a lot ridiculous on the face of it. What this reminds me of the sort of moral witch hunts that we had going on in the 80s. I loved President Reagan. He's just absolutely the greatest, but Ed Meese was just not to my taste. The worry was the satanic cults that were in the preschools and that video games were turning our children into monsters and all the rest. And, now it's the left that have taken up these sort of silly causes for things that aren't happening and have never happened. And it's sad to see. I thought maybe we'd gotten past that, but we're human beings and we seek blame or we seek to gain power, and this is just one of the methods that we use to do those things. It's one of the reasons why we have a constitution, in order to prevent people from gaining enough power to do those kinds of things. It usually works, not always. It does give me hope, though, with the Supreme Court. What the Supreme Court said here wasn't that they are endorsing this lawsuit and that they hope that the plaintiffs win. They're just saying that essentially they don't have the standing to stop this lawsuit, and we'll see where it goes forward from here. As I think Bill said during the backstage while we were talking about this lawsuit, as it goes forward, is probably going to end up right back at the Supreme Court. And that may be the best thing possible. If the Supreme Court had just put a stop to this lawsuit, this kind of thing would just continue to fester and fester until the next case. What may instead happen, and I hope this is the case, is just like the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the gun manufacturers in that previous lawsuit, once this case takes years and works its way back to the Supreme Court, they will be able, which they were not able to do with this decision that came out just in the last couple of days, what they will be able to do in the future when this case revisits them as an appeal is issue an actual ruling and say, listen, you can't go after people for marketing like this.
This is an interesting case in the sense that it will be played up by people on both sides as a gun rights case. The people who are in favor of the Second Amendment rights enshrined in the Constitution, the natural right to protect yourself, to keep and bear arms, on the one hand, and the people who believe that government should have the power to protect the public safety by restricting the sale, the transportation, and other kinds of commercial activities, specifically around firearms. There's a case that's going to the Supreme Court, scheduled to be on their docket in December, that they're being asked to decide whether New York, the state of New York, can legally restrict the transportation of legally owned firearms. I've mentioned this before on our shows that there were people, before the Bill of Rights existed, there were people who talked about the risk of publishing a Bill of Rights, because when you get down to particulars about things that they believed had no business being part of the federal government's purview whatsoever, they were not in the federal bailiwick. You start putting that stuff down on paper, you basically open the door to say, this is a matter about which the federal government is concerned, and therefore we are going to nibble around the crust of this thing until we can get right down to the heart of the matter. And so you see these ongoing challenges to the Second Amendment. There's another matter here that perhaps can go unstated, but I think it's important. Cases like this are shopped. The people who are advocates in a particular area of the legal structure of this country are always looking for ways to test it. And so they are looking for the best possible case, just like they found the defendant, or the plaintiff rather, in Roe v. Wade, because they were looking for her. So they found these parents at Sandy Hook and said, let's get behind this effort. And then after you find your plaintiff, then you go shopping for a court. And so this whole process, really, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than we're even aware of. All of it designed to tilt the tables of justice in your favor. There's no such thing as just these sort of bland, neutral arbiters who are constantly saying, gee, I wonder what the right thing is. Let's see if we can give a fair hearing to something. No, you've got advocates on one side and the other who are aggressively shopping around to get a favorable decision. And so when this case comes up, what breaks my heart is that these people who lost their kids in this horrible shooting situation have been turned into avatars of something, that they are being used by a movement. Most of these people, had this event not happened, would have very little, if no connection at all with the issue of gun rights, and they would have blissfully gone about their lives. But because they've become, associated victims in this horrible slaughter, now they become pictures. And that's what the left is looking for, specifically people who are trying to reduce the rights we have are looking for those vivid images, those graphic depictions of the case that they want to make. And finally, I want to say that the issue here is not really about guns. It's about speech. It's about words.
That's right.
It's about incitement. And for those who would come down heavily on this and say, yeah, it's about time Remington Arms and other gun manufacturers got their day in court and fell before the bar of justice, you're not really arguing about guns here. You're arguing about whether somebody has the right to say something that some people will consider to be inciting violence or inciting crime, and other people will consider to be nothing at all but a bland an advertisement for a product. Which side of the free speech argument do you want to be on? That's the better question here, not which side of the gun debate you want to be on. If you want to go after the gun makers and say that they are culpable because they made the bullet, they made the trigger, they made the magazine, whatever it was, that wound up being an agent of the slaughter of these kids, go after them on that basis. The slimy little weasels who are pushing these cases by coming through the free speech avenue are not only cloaking their true intentions, but they're hurting everybody in the sense that most of us in America are much more likely to have occasion to exercise our free speech right than we are our right to keep and bear arms. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible, and thanks to our friends at the Patriot Post.